What's going on, everyone? It's your host, the Sports Moose, coming at you finally. Episode 12 of the Thunderdome Puckcast. Great episode for you tonight. As we always do, we are due to check in on the Atlantic Division. They're up next for us to check, so our very own Atlantic Division. Trade rumors and deals. Lots of stuff going on. Trade deadline, I believe, is tomorrow, Monday. I'm recording here on Sunday the 23rd, so it's coming up this week at least. Pretty sure it's tomorrow. Bolts streak in review. Another huge win streak for the Bolts, and it's been a little bit since we've actually caught up with them. So we're gonna spare you going game by game, but we're gonna pick a few of the key games during the streak, the sequel, part two, second big streak for the Bolts this year. Our usual hot or not, a little bit shorter than usual, just with the trade deadline coming up. And then, of course, what's up ahead for our Bolts busy schedule. As we always do, we're so happy you're here with us on the Sports Heap. Let's hit that intro. Hope you're having a great evening, everybody. It's your host, the Sports Moose, coming live at you from the Sports Heap Man Cave here in Austin, Texas. Hope you're having a great end of your weekend. Another busy week coming up for the Bolts and for me as well. Big reminder, of course, you've got my Twitter handle right below. I usually watch a good chunk of our Lightning games, so you'll always find me at the Sports Moose at Moose_TSH. And of course, big reminder, don't forget, you can find the Thunderdome Puckcast now on all your favorite podcasting platforms. That includes Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and even iHeartRadio. We're on there. I searched for it the other day. It pulls up. If you're a big iHeartRadio fan, look for us there. All 11, now 12 episodes are uploaded regularly to your favorite podcasting platforms. Again, I'm your host, the Sports Moose. Kind of my solo project here with the Sports Heap. We do 4 other shows, a few of them on hiatus right now because it's the off season. But our other big show is the Viper's Nest, our big show for the XFL season. It's been a little bit disappointing for the Tampa Bay Vipers so far, but still love them. Still going to stick with them. They're our team, and the XFL experiment has been great. I don't know if any of you guys out there, my audience for Thunderdome Puckcast, have enjoyed the XFL or not. Feel free to shoot us a tweet or leave comments here on YouTube. Speaking of YouTube, of course, you can always find us on our vlog channel. The Sports Heap should bring up all our shows, and then you can search for the Thunderdome Puckcast playlist. You can find all our episodes on there, usually pre-recorded every episode, so you can see what's going on, at least when I'm speaking at you by myself in a room on a microphone. And like today, you can see me sipping on my old-fashioned, homemade, perfect end to a great weekend. Great weekend off, ready to get back to work tomorrow and get through the week. But before that, let's talk Bolts. It's been a few weeks since we last caught up with you. I'm hoping to make these more regular. It's been a little tricky with the kickoff of the XFL season and a few personal things going on, but we're back. We'll try to get these weekly for you on the weekends for the Thunderdome Puckcast. So, as we usually do, we'll do our division check-ins, and if you're watching on YouTube, that's great. You can look at the screen and see some of the stats we're talking about. Again, if you're on podcast, I'll try to talk fancy stats at you. You can imagine what they look like on a nice fancy chart, I guess. But let's go with our Atlantic Division check-in. And the first thing we always do is see where we're at in the standings. Huge 11-game win streak for the Lightning. Made up, I think the number was 11 or 12 points on the Bruins, who themselves were playing some excellent hockey. I think during the Lightning win streak of 11-0, of course, I think the Bruins went 9-0-2 or 9-1-1. So really, in that time frame, Lightning really only making up a few points, which is super disappointing. And actually, you got to be thankful that we won 11 games in a row, because had we been playing average hockey, the gap would have been even bigger. So I'm going to switch over to the full screen so you can see what I'm looking at. And then, of course, your statistics right here for the Eastern Conference and for the Atlantic Division. Of course, the Big Bees leading the division. The Bolts were the first team to 40 wins, however. The Bees definitely beneficiaries of some loser points there. The OTLs, 12 of them. I think they lead. I know Columbus has got 14, and that's what is keeping them in the race so far. So I think they're second in OTLs of 12. I think and the Senators have 11. Looks like the only double-digit teams with some double-digit OTLs. So that's helpful. Let's say 6 of those went the other way. They didn't get a point. Well, I guess they could have won those, right? So they could potentially be even further ahead. So I guess we should be thankful for the OTLs, the loser points. I don't know. I guess if you lose the shootout or an overtime, you get that extra point, of course. So Bolts first to 40 wins, 5 points behind the Bees right now, 1 game at hand. So it puts us really, truly, hopefully at only 3 points behind, as you see the screen. Nice, comfortable lead for third place. So Bolts are looking at taking the division or second place, pending a monumental breakdown the last quarter of the season to go. 20 games to go for the Bolts. 13-point lead on the Leafs and 15 on the Panthers at 70 points. So we might not get our Bolts-Panthers matchup unless the Panthers can jump the Leafs. That would be nice. Get that Lightning-Panthers first-round matchup. I'd like that. Despite them having Bobrovsky, that's the only... He hasn't been played super well this year. So that is my only fear, though, is it just takes 2 seconds for Bobrovsky to get hot, and hopefully we're not having a repeat of last year. But I'm still liking the Panthers-Lightning for that first-round matchup. Canadiens, Sabres, Senators, and Wings all taking up the back half of the Atlantic Division. We'll talk a little bit about the Red Wings today, because this is a pretty rough record, and I'm curious to see how this compares to, I guess, the records of some of the worst teams in the league to have ever existed. We'll talk about that in Hot or Not. But again, kind of what we expected a little bit. I think maybe my personal disappointment with the standings so far, thought Buffalo would really be up there. They were leading the division for the first month and a half, and then they just kind of fell off the wayside. I don't know what happened. Definitely not getting the goaltending that they perhaps were getting at the beginning of the year. And I mean, honestly, the Bruins are playing out of their minds for the last 3 months, as well as the Lightning. Sabres came down to earth pretty quickly, and again, kind of I'd say my Eastern Conference disappointment. I think that if you're looking at the standings, we expected Boston, the Lightning, and the Leafs. I really thought it's going to be Buffalo and Florida really pushing in there for that 4th spot. And right now, Florida's starting to pull away from the Canadiens as well. Canadiens look like they're sellers at the trade deadline, so looks like they're kind of packing it in. They just traded Kovalchuk. Had a couple other trades that they've made as sellers, and we'll talk about the trade deadline in a little bit. So that's kind of an overview of your conference standings. Let's look at statistics. And we got our team statistics. I was looking at how we're doing in terms of power play, even strength play, all that fun stuff. I think Bolts are 5th in the league. Boston is 2nd in power play. And surprising here, the Leafs up in 3rd in the entire league for the power play. So don't want to be shorthanded against those teams. But on the flip side, the penalty kill, Boston's right up there as well, third, and Lightning dropped down to seventh after a tough game against the Coyotes last night. So penalty kill's been struggling as of late for the Bolts, but still, as long as you're adding up to, you like seeing being over 100% on special teams. So 82 and 23, still going to get the job done over 100%. Should mean you're having some success in the game. I like looking at penalty minutes a game as well, which is really interesting. League leaders are the Rangers. Lightning actually looks like they're the 8th most penalized team in the league. They're averaging about 9.5, 10 minutes a game. So usually giving up a significant number of power plays. But and then you compare it against opponent penalty minutes, it's about pretty even, 4 to 5 power plays for each side. So there's really no discrepancy there. Who's the biggest discrepancy? That's actually really interesting. Avalanche, most disciplined team, is going to be the Coyotes. Though that's kind of no surprise there. I think looking at that game, and we'll talk about that game at our next episode. But I think the Lightning only had 3 power play opportunities. They might have scored on one of them, actually, against the Coyotes. And you're always looking at shot percentage. Lightning, of course, number 1 in shot percentage. 11.3% of their shots going in. And then you always want to look at goals for and goals against. Lightning, of course, leading the way and tied with the Maple Leafs, actually, with most goals per game. Goals against, your leaders are the Boston Bruins right now, leading the chase for the Jennings Trophy, with Dallas Stars a close second there. Ben Bishop and Khudobin leading the way for the Dallas Stars. Do they have the average goals per game? They have goals for. I always like seeing average goals per game. I have it up here on the standings. Let's scroll up here to the standings. I always like seeing regulation points. And again, Boston Bruins owning the league in that, 67.5%. Lightning at 62%. Let's look more closely now at some of the Corsi and Fenwick data to see performance in the 5-on-5 portion of the game. Again, when you're looking at the shot percentage, the Lightning are right up there. And second in the division are going to be the Florida Panthers, which they've been high octane for quite a bit. They were leading the league in goals scored for quite a bit until the Lightning went on recent pushes. Recent push. Save percentage. Of course, the Bees getting some stellar play from Tuukka Rask. Lightning are up there, and that's really where the Panthers are struggling. So far, they're getting under 90% save percentage from their goalie tandem. And then shooting percentage plus save percentage. Yeah, you want to be 100%. It's really where you want to be on that. And Panthers right at the cutoff line there in Toronto as well. But again, the Lightning really leading the way when you're looking at shot percentage and save percentage. I like looking at the Corsi, as you kind of get an idea of. So Corsi, for those, are shots, blocks, and misses. And let me bring it up here for the screen. So of course you're looking here at the Lightning, some of their top parts, top of the league. So when you're looking at Corsi 4, so shots, blocks, and misses, kind of is a good indicator of offensive pressure. And it looks like the Canadians actually have really forced play, and maybe they're just not getting goals to go in, or maybe their misses are a little bit higher than actual true shots on goal. Really, the Senators have faced an onslaught per the statistics on 5-on-5. So when you're looking at Corsi 4 and 4 against, really who's controlling play. The Montreal Canadiens seem to be controlling play, as well as the Lightning and the Leafs. Boston Bruins is more so 50-50. And the poor Detroit Red Wings, 45%, means that they're getting owned, essentially. Fenwick will just be your shots and misses. Similar story with Montreal up top. And it should be at the top of that with the Lightning at 52%. Again, poor Detroit kind of getting worked most of the way. So at this point of the league, when some statistics are done on where shots are coming from on even strength, expected goals for the Toronto Maple Leafs, 147. So they're actually only performing at -2 from where they were expected. And again, the Lightning really right now, their expected goals for 134, and they're at +22. So again, great indicator of they are really, really, really playing well, even at 5-on-5, because a lot of the criticism, of course, will be, well, they have one of the best power plays in the league, and, sure, they're making other teams pay for their transgressions on the ice, right? But Lightning are playing a great 5-on-5 game. I mean, I think that's part of the difference from last year was they really relied on the power play, and that well dried up in the playoffs. On top of Bobrovsky playing well and just the team overall being outworked, but couldn't score on the power play, and they were almost a one-trick pony last year with the power play. One of the best power plays to the power plays in terms of a season performance in NHL history last year. I like looking at the scoring chances. Of course, leading for scoring chances, Leafs, Canadian Lightning in the top. Scoring chances against, Lightning towards the bottom. So Lightning minimizing high-quality chances. Oh, here we go. I love the high-danger scoring for. I'm going to guess the Lightning are near the top of that. But it's really the against. And again, the Lightning playing. This is great evidence of the Lightning playing much better defense. And here I will point at high danger scoring chances against. Lightning actually number 1. So I mean, this is potentially showing that the Lightning are minimizing high scoring chances against. So that's awesome. I love statistics, and looking at hockey in this way has really changed my mind on how our performance has been, especially early on. All these indicators were the reverse, right? The stats showed that we were playing bad. Of course, our place in the standings always show that, especially at the beginning 2 months of the year. But when you're looking at these statistics and our performance, it was just great to see. It's been great to see the improvement on all fronts, our commitment to defense, and truly trusting John Cooper and the message which a lot of us hockey and Lightning pundits and we like to criticize, and we were like, oh, looks like the message is getting dry from Cooper, but he stayed tried and true. He stayed true to his message, and we have to admire that. And you got to give him credit. We got to give credit where credit is due. So I think that wraps up our look team-wise. Let's take a look at skater statistics before we move on to our second topic of the evening. Skater statistics. Let me see if I can plop that over for the screen if you're watching along at home. Of course, David Pastrnak leading the league in goals with 45. He's got to be up there in scoring. I think Leon Draisaitl leading the way overall in points. He had 97, just 11-point lead on Pastrnak, and McKinnon's been having a great year of Colorado. So goal scoring, I think you won't see a Lightning player till number 11, right? Kucherov and Stamkos tied at 29. Both of them should be joining the 30-goal mark in the upcoming games. And there's Draisaitl, and McDavid's been out a little bit with some injury. So kind of a stellar season. Still 81 points for him, and he's been out with some injuries. this year, and I think he's currently out with injury. Assists, of course, I think that's Draisaitl leading the way. We talked about Carlson having a hell of his year for Washington, 15 goals, 56 assists. I mean, he's probably he could potentially get into the maybe 85 points by when it's all said and done. And even Brad Marchand, the Rat, everyone's favorite villain, having a great year. Hats off to Brad Marchand. Of course, we talked about McDavid, the bread man, having a heck of a year for the Rangers. Kind of a lost year, but I think they're starting to find the heir apparent to the king. They've had some great options in goal. Georgiev, among some other youngsters that they have in goal. So I think they're going to be okay. I'm thinking they're going to be okay in goal once Hank decides to hang it up. Take a look at power play goals. Pasty leading the way, 19. And Ovechkin, who just hit goal number 700 for his career with 12 power play goals. Again, no surprise there. 10 goals for Steven Stamkos, who leads the Lightning in power play goals. So 10 out of his almost 30 have been on the power play. I'm going to do shooting percentage. I wish they would minimize this. It's the highest shooting percentage guy is going to be TJ Oshie. Killorn, actually. So this is really interesting. Killorn at 23. Killorn might get to 30 this year, which would be the exceeding expectations for Alexander Killorn. Really, hopefully making the case for him to stay on the team and not be exposed to the draft for Seattle. Someone who's been playing really well, someone who I guess just didn't have any more room in Boston has been Noel Acciari with Florida. Center of Florida has played in most of their games. Going to have a 20-goal season. So that's a big name for Florida finding their way. Kind of a similar situation to Killorn, where we really needed more from him, and he's getting it done this year. So we'll have to keep monitoring that as we go along. I always like looking at the defensive statistics. Of course, your blocks. Really, none of the Lightning are up there in blocks. I think McDonough is our leader, and he's, of course, out with injury. Should be close to coming back. But he leads the league. He leads the team in shot blocks, so he's all the way down at 35. So, Lightning, not big proponents of shot blocking, at least now, while the game is still young, or the season's still young. But I'm sure that'll step it up. We'll step it up as soon as we get into the playoffs. So that has been your division check, your Atlantic Division check-in. Let's switch gears and talk about trade rumors and deals. And here is the most recent acquisition for the Lightning via trade. This happened, when did this happen? About a week or so ago, right? February 16th? Yeah, almost a week. Last weekend, before we were able to get episode 12 up and going for Thunderdome Puckcast. But February 16th, kind of an interesting move. Lightning acquiring Blake Coleman from the New Jersey Devils. Has had a decent year so far. I think we like the motor on this guy. Statistically, 28, 29-year-old doesn't have overly impressive numbers, but has been playing well recently. Kind of a friendly deal as well. I think it's a $1.8 million cap hit. We paid the price for him, and I think this is one where asked me in June if I like this trade. Paid the price for him. Of course, a first-round pick in either this upcoming draft or the 2021 draft, depending on where certain teams finish. I think it might be Vancouver or something like that. But then, giving up Nolan Foote, I think, really hurts. Maybe we know Sergei's going to be with us for a while, and of course Hedman's going to be with us forever. And yeah, I mean, it's really tough. I think that's tough because, you have a couple years of cap-friendly numbers for prospects as they transition into the NHL. So that's, some cheap play. But, did we need forward help? I don't know unless we're concerned about injuries or depth. I guess Paquette's been having a decent year, right? And even Tyler Johnson's been coming alive. This was, we can always appreciate the help on offense, and he's gritty. I think having Pat Maroon in there has really shored up our grittiness, and it's really carried on to the rest of the team. I like the way Chernak's been playing. Even John Ruda, before he got injured, was playing pretty well. And just been playing physical. And as we go through some of our streak games, our physicality was challenged by a few of these teams that are traditionally more physical than us, and we've been able to stand up to that. So I think this is part of that move is, we needed someone with a motor, someone who's going to work hard and hard and hard and hard. And I'm hoping Blake Coleman is the missing piece. Of course, the big news coming out earlier this Sunday is Lightning acquiring Bogosian from, I guess he was in the minors, right? He was on waivers by the Sabres, and we went ahead and signed him. So I don't know if that means that Eric Chernak's injury, he left early, I think, against the either Coyotes or the Golden Knights. Hopefully his injury is not super significant. But I guess the depth is, we needed to add depth enough that we needed an experienced defenseman like Zach Bogosian. So that move happening as well. I think that was just we just acquired him. No trade for Zach Bogosian. So let's take a look at the rest of the NHL and what's been transpiring since about the beginning of February is when few of the GMs start getting crazy and start making calls and making deals. And really, the action started February 5th, and I like this move. I don't know if we've seen if the Leafs have seen the results that they wanted to see from it so far, but like this move because I think this was a big question mark for the Leafs. Is if they were tough, they acquired Cal Clifford from the Kings, and also made a move for backup goalie Jack Campbell, who's been backing up Quickie out there in Los Angeles. Traded away Trevor Moore, third rounder, and then a third round pick in 2021. Think this is a great deal for both sides. Kings obviously going to be in rebuild mode with a few of their aging superstars dropping off and potentially retiring. So picks are always appreciated, and then I think this has been a question for the Leafs. They almost look like the Lightning last year. It's really they had no muscle in the old lineup, and I think Kyle Clifford gives them a little bit of street cred as they make the push for the playoffs. Firing a Babcock was an interesting move at the beginning of the year. Lots of questions of if this team was tough enough. There's been talk of their current coach, is he the right guy? I mean, how many guys are you going to fire in the year, Leafs fans? Come on. So, like this move, this happened at the beginning of February. This was a couple days later, I think a really good move here. Penguins send Alex Galchenyuk over to Minnesota in exchange for Jason Zucker. I think this was a good move for the Penguins. Islanders got Andy Green with the New Jersey Devils cleaning house, sending Coleman our way, and then Andy Green, very experienced defenseman, over to division rivals, the New York Islanders, for a second-round pick and prospects. This was a big move. I think Canucks putting the chips in. They are putting the chips in. They are committed. They're making a run. I don't know if a lot of people expected Vancouver to be in the position they are currently in. Chips are in, acquiring Tyler Toffoli from the LA Kings, who have been sellers, sending over Tim Schaller, rights to Tyler Madden, a second rounder, and then a conditional pick in 2022. So this was a big, big, valuable piece for the Canucks. Got to get some support to Besser, who's been out on injury, and Elias Pettersson. Another great year. Markstrom playing phenomenal between pipes. They could make a run. I don't know if they're built to get out of that first round, but when we'll probably look at the Pacific and in 2 episodes from now, so we'll check in on those division standings. My guess is as we're getting towards the end of March, we might look at division standings for all the divisions as we near the playoffs. So that was a really big acquisition, Tyler Toffoli. We were expecting him to move on, being a valuable piece for the Kings. We've talked about the Sharks having a tough year. Like half their starting roster is injured or has had injury, making them sellers here at the deadline. And it's the Capitals that end up getting Brendan Dillon, who's been a valuable piece for that organization for so long. I know hearing some interviews and reading some articles, he was definitely a little choked up about leaving. I think he was drafted by the Sharks, right? I mean, this is a team that he's been with his whole career for the most part. Really grew up here, and moving on to the Capitals, going to get a chance to play in the playoffs this year. Obviously, the Sharks kind of down year. I think once everyone's healthy, they should be right back at it next year. But we'll wait and see. Of course, another name, no movement yet, is Joe Thornton, who's kind of been going back and forth on lifting his no trade clause or no movement clause from the Sharks. He's intrigued by the idea of playing for a contender. So the Lightning had been a name that's been linked to Thornton. I would love to see Jumbo Joe on the Lightning. Marco Scandella makes his way to St. Louis so far, just for a couple picks from the Canadiens. And another big one, Alec Martinez, LA Kings going over to the Golden Knights. So I think this is a really big move for the Knights. Again, the Pacific is wide open. I think that let me look really quickly here back at the standings, right? Yeah, here we go. Knights are leading the division right now, but basically anyone from the Calgary Flames are 6 points behind with a game in hand at 68 points, and winning a couple games, they could be at the leading division. And same thing for the Canucks. Canucks actually have 2 games at hand on the Golden Knights with 72 points and 71 points for the Oilers. That division is going to come down to the wire. So big move. Chips are in for the Vegas Golden Knights, looking to make playoffs every year of their existence. Go Knights. And really, nothing else too big. Bruins get a value winger, Andre Case. Cody Eakin goes to Winnipeg from the Golden Knights. And kind of a third, fourth liner, Ben Harper and Mika Salamaki switching places from Toronto to the Predators in Nashville. Of course, big news so far is the trading of Ilya Kovalchuk to the Washington Capitals from the Canadiens. So again, the Canadiens a little bit of a seller right now at the trade deadline. So those are your trade rumors and deals. We'll summarize what happens this week on episode 13 next Sunday on the Thunderdome Puckcast. See who ended up with who. See if the Lightning are still not done. Be nice to get Joe Thornton or another big name to really make that push for the Stanley Cup this year. Let's move to the streak. The streak in review for the Tampa Bay Lightning. A truly phenomenal stretch of games. We talked about the first 3 games in episode 12, or episode 11 of the Puckcast, starting their West Coast swing in LA, Anaheim, and San Jose. Pretty easy games from there. They returned home for a set against Vegas, Pittsburgh, and the New York Islanders. The road to Columbus and Pittsburgh, and then back home again. Edmonton, Philadelphia, and a big win at Colorado. So really wanted to go through a few of these key games. And I think one of these key games is the first Penguins game, because the Penguins are, of course, a playoff team and could give the Lightning some trouble. They're records are fairly similar. They were fairly similar at the time when they matched up. I mean, pretty much identical records and point totals. And the Lightning really took it to the Penguins here. Vasi playing a great game, 29 out of 31 on the save clock. Physical game, both teams over 30 hits. Shots were even, which is always great to see. Face-offs were pretty much even, and everyone had their opportunity on the power play. No power play goals, I don't think, scored by either team, so that's always exciting to see. Goal scorers for the Lightning, of course, were Cirelli with a goal. Victor had 3 assists. Sergei getting on the board. Stamkos on the board. And Malkin scoring for the Penguins. So, again, this was a gritty game. Chippy. Another sellout in Amalie Arena. And you got to play well against these playoff teams. And the Lightning took care of business against the Penguins in Tampa. They, of course, played them in Pittsburgh a few days later, and it's a very similar game. Took care of business there. Wanted to highlight the New York game because we always find a way to have trouble against the Islanders, and it was no different here because the Islanders truly controlled play here for a little bit, but then the Lightning took over and ended up dominating them, basically outshooting them 2-1, 30-18 total on the shot clock. Again, a physical game. Hits on each side nearing 40, which, again, is getting us ready for April hockey. Face-offs were even, which we like seeing. And kind of a clean game. Only 2 penalties on each side. Braden Point, goal and assist. Vasi, another great game. Only giving up 1 to Derek Brassard. Goal scorers were Carter Verhaeghe, getting close to double digits for Verhaeghe. I was dogging him earlier in the year. He's getting it. He's getting there. I'm happy with the development we've seen from him on the 3rd and 4th line as he's been swapping in and out. Braden Point, of course, with a goal, and Stamkos with another goal in this one. So, once again, gritty game, physical game. These are the types of games we're going to have to find a way and win in the playoffs. So, I like highlighting these because Islanders always have been giving us trouble lately. And then, of course, anytime that we have a nice gritty win, want to highlight that. Next was that rematch and kind of facing our fears, right? First trip to Columbus since the epic debacle last year. Curtis McElhinney getting the start here, and he did not disappoint. This was a back and forth game. Really, it was a goaltending show for the most part. Again, Curtis McElhinney coming out on top of that. Who started for Columbus? I think it's Merzlikins, right? We talked about Merzlikins on Hot or Not last week. Continued stellar play, just barely getting outperformed by McElhinney in the game. Merzlikins has been playing really well. Though I think Korpisalo has been finishing up his rehab assignments in the AHL and should be coming back up. So I'm curious to see how that works out for Columbus. At least they're going to have 2 great performing goalies as they try to make their own playoff push. Cooch scoring both goals. One of them the game winner in overtime. So he scored a first period goal. Second period goal by Oliver Borkstrand, and no scoring in the third period in this one. Again, really, really gritty and tight. Columbus out hitting the Bolts 38-23 on the hit clock. And again, face-offs pretty even, which we like to see. So again, nice gritty effort by the boys there. And this was the big one for me because I think Colorado is a Stanley Cup contender. And I hope this was a preview of the Stanley Cup final because this game was awesome. I mean, awesome game. Back and forth. You thought at one point you thought Colorado was done, and they crept back in. The Lightning had to steal it in overtime. They were on the board first with Burakovsky on the power play in the first period, and then the Lightning come back 3 goals in a row, 2 in quick succession. I think they had 2 goals was it 15, 20 seconds. Kaloran getting his 23rd, and Cameron Gauntz, Gauncy getting in there with some of the injuries we've had on defense, scoring, I think, a laser from the point. Really, the puck that had eyes found its way into the net. Stamkos, we've talked about him. The 4 games that we've picked to talk about, it seems like Stamkos has scored in each one. Stamkos with his 27th. Nikushkin scoring the game-tying goal in the third period. McKinnon on the board, and we talked about Burakovsky. And Cooch, tough turnover by McKinnon in the offensive zone. Cooch basically had a breakaway from the Lightning blue line all the way in and was able to make a finesse move and slide it past Colorado's goalie, Frank Kuz, who haunted us 4 months ago. If you remember, one of the first Thunderdome Puckcast was in sheer amazement of Francouz. I think it was Francouz. I've been saying it wrong. Francouz. It's a French C with the little squiggly thing, right? An amazing effort by him in Tampa. Not so much here. Gave up 4 goals on 27 shots. Michael Henny 3 on 27. So not necessarily a goalie's battle here, but again, just a gritty game. I know I've said gritty like a million times, and if you're taking shots every time I say gritty, you're probably hammered by now. But these are the 4 games that show that I think we're on a different level than last year, and if we can maintain this, which we've lost the last 2 games that we're not going to talk about in this episode. We've lost to Vegas and Arizona now in kind of stinkers. We'll talk about that in episode 13, but if we're able to play this way consistently, we're going to cause problems. And again, if this is a matchup at the Stanley Cup Final, it's going to be a great Stanley Cup Final. 7 games, because Avalanche have been growing their team for the past few seasons, and the Lightning's window has been, open for like 5 years. We've just had a couple tough breaks. So that's it for the review of the streak, of course, coming to an end against the Vegas Golden Knights, which we'll talk about next episode on episode 13. So tough break, but 11-game winning streak, the longest in Lightning history, and second winning streak of at least 10 games. That's the first time that's happened in, I want to say 50 years. First time that a team has had 2 10-game winning streaks in the same season. Let's finish up with hot or not, and then we'll get us on our way with what's ahead for the Bolts. Really wanted to talk about Ivan Kovalchuk's play recently, and actually, he's a rare case of hot and not, because prior to his performance the last week and a half, he had been on an absolute tear. Of course, moving on from LA and being sent over to Montreal, or was he picked up on waivers? I think he was. Played really well for Montreal. Has had a quiet couple of games prior to now being traded to Washington, but he made my hot list, and I forgot to sneak him in there for episode 11, so I wanted to make sure I snuck him in here on episode 12. But actually, also on the not list, he hasn't been playing well. I think 1 point, which he just got like yesterday, in the last 7 games. So hopefully a change in scenery, playing with the great 8, fellow Russian. I think Washington's making a push here. They've made some pretty good acquisitions with Dylan and now Kovalchuk. That's going to be a dangerous team. And they've really needed to shore up their defense. I hope he always finds a way to play when the time counts. He hasn't had a great year this year. But and I think they've had Samsonov kind of splitting time because Colby's been not playing well. But I fully expect Colby to be the playoff starter when time comes. So, Kovalchuk, you're both hot and you're not. On my hot list here, Battle of Alberta is back. And again, something we didn't have time for in episode 11. But it's been absolute war between the Edmonton Oilers, Calgary Flames. Had our first goalie fight in years. I think it was Rittich and Smitty, right? Rittich and Smitty went at it. Huge, absolute brawl. I mean, you've had Cassian being suspended. You've had Chuck turtling and then fighting, and it's been an absolute crazy, crazy, crazy show. Anytime these guys get together, let's see the upcoming schedule. I think they played 2 or 3 games within succession. I think the Oilers really got the best of them in the last matchup. Don't quote me on that, but Battle of Alberta, welcome back. Hockey that matters between both these teams, welcome back. And I know that they are destined to meet in the playoffs. So it's going to be a crazy series if they do. Big hot to the Battle of Alberta. And closing up Hot or Not, wanted to talk a little bit about the Red Wings because, I think we all fully expected them to be at the bottom of the Eastern, or of the Atlantic Division, and maybe even the Eastern Conference, but of the whole league, especially with Stevie Y coming on board. Very surprising. I think it's been surprising to see how bad they are. I mean, current record 12-44-7, and they have 19 games to go. So, winning 25% of those with 19. So they'll win maybe 5 more games, so 17 and potentially 59, 58, 59. That's brutal. So I found a fun article about teams in NHL history here, where they would rank among the worst teams, and actually, safe to say they're going to be safe. They are going to be safe from being among the 10 worst teams in NHL history. Should they win 25% of their last 20 games left. So I think that's going to be fortunate for the Red Wings, but definitely probably in the top 20, 25 worst teams to have ever existed. Let me see if we can show you here. Bleacher Report putting a list together recently. I think a lot of folks have been asking the same question. It's like, wow, Detroit's really bad. What's going on? We all remember the expansion Senators, 14-61-9. Man, here are some names you might remember: Alexei Yashin and Alexander Dale. Oh my gosh. Jokes on, Senators actually built up pretty quickly and were making runs to the Stanley Cup Finals within 10 years, I want to say, right? Early 2000s, they were a force to be reckoned with. They were making the Eastern Conference Finals almost every year. So a little bit of growing pains there. Certainly not any love like the expansion teams seem to get now. I mean, wow, they're basically gifted a playoff berth with the friendly rules for expansion for Vegas and probably Seattle. So top 10 team, 93-94 Senators. Quebec Nordiques were really bad in 89 and 90. Oh, wow. Matt Sundin, number 1 guy there. But yeah, 12-61-7. Man, that was a brutal season for the Quebec Nordiques. Islanders here, 12-60-2. Was this before or after they went through their epic tear? Oh, there we go. 4 Stanley Cups, 79-83, right? So this is kind of building the foundation for the team that would win 4 Stanley Cups in a row. Yeah, that was brutal. 12 games on the year. Had to pay $4 million to the Rangers. Wow, that's a fun story. Didn't know about that. So 12-60-2. Rangers back in 43-44, 639-5. Of course, that was during World War II. 6 wins. Definitely brutal. 80-81 Jets, 957-14. Jets had actually won the last WHA championships before the league merged. Oof, lose a peg instead of Winnipeg. That's brutal. Kansas City Scouts, of course, they lasted only a few years in Kansas City before moving to New Jersey, and part of that reason is they were not good. 12-56-12 in 75. Quebec Bulldogs, I think, were only 1 year. Existed 1 year before they moved on. No, here are the expansion Senators. 92-93 Senators. 10-70-4. Oh my gosh. That is brutal. Oof. Yeah, 24 points on the year. So Detroit, you're not looking so bad so far. right up there. I think it was a year after expansion for the Sharkies. 1171-2. Or there's Irbe. Wow, 411 goals against average, 726. It's brutal. And then the number one worst team back in the 70s, the Washington Capitals were 867-5. Oh my gosh. Yeah, 131 winning percentage, lost 39 of 40 road games, and 17 in a row at one point. Oof, that is a bad team. But so Detroit, while you're still on my not list, it's not in the top 10 worst teams in the league at least. And let's wrap this episode up with what's to come for the Tampa Bay Lightning in the upcoming week. Of course, talked about Arizona. Then they'll come home for games against the Blackhawks, the Leafs, and against the Calgary Flames. Half of the Battle Alberta is coming to Hamley Arena, so fully expect some pretty good tilts here. Of course, the Lightning, spoiler alert, already dropping the game to Arizona. Had the Kachina jerseys on last night. I was excited to see those. That might be my next jersey purchase. Wink, wink. I think that's the next one, is getting the Phoenix Coyotes, the Kachina jerseys. I love those. The old JR, the Roenick jerseys, Roenick era jerseys in Phoenix. That has been it for us here at the Thunderdome Puckcast. Again, hopefully we're getting back to our weekly schedule. Thank you for sticking out with us in episode 12, episode 13. Hopefully next Sunday, summarizing the NHL trade deadline and any deals that went on. We'll check in on the Central Division. We'll check in on the Metropolitan Division, our Eastern Division, our Eastern Conference rivals in the Met Division. We'll take a look at how the Lightning did, some hot or not, as we always do, and some what's coming up next for the Lightning as we start getting to the home stretch, getting into March. It's been your host, Moose, with Thunderdome Puckcast. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at Moose_TSH. Make sure to follow Emrod as well at Emrod_TSH on Twitter. Make sure you're finding us on your favorite podcast platforms. That includes Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and even iHeartRadio. We're on there as well. And look for us on YouTube at The Sports Heap. That's our channel name. And you'll find all of our shows on there. Right now, it's XFL season, so lots of Viper's Nest episodes coming up, as well as Thunderdome Puckcast. It's been your host, Moose. Thank you so much for hanging out with us on this Sunday night. See you next week. Go Bolts!